colleagues, ladies and gentlemen of the media. I thank you very much for responding, particularly at such short notice. This afternoon, our press conference would primarily deal with the matters arising out of yesterday's sitting of the National Assembly, and to treat with those matters, here with us are several ministers of the government. I might first introduce Senior Minister within the Office of the President with the responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh. Minister of Governance and Parliamentary Affairs, Ms. Gail Teixeira. Minister of Natural Resources, Vikram Bharat. Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, Charles Ramson Jr., and Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce, Onej Walron. These 5 ministers of the government will outline and detail to you several matters in relation to yesterday's sitting of the National Assembly, in which we are all familiar with at this time: the disruption, the thuggery, the reprehensible behavior by the opposition to the work of the government, in relation to the work of the government. And I would therefore like the members of the public to follow this press conference, as we are also live throughout the country. I will now ask Dr. Ashni Singh to commence his presentation, to be followed by Minister Bharat and then Madam Gail Teixeira, and the other 2 ministers will intervene at the most appropriate time. Thank you, and I now proceed to Dr. Ashni Singh.
Thank you very much, Minister McCoy, colleagues at the head table, my colleague ministers, and of course, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Let me first of all thank all of you for coming out to participate in this press conference, and also, of course, acknowledge, given that we're close to the end of the year, acknowledge the tremendous work that the Media Corps has been doing throughout the year, ensuring that our population remains informed on current affairs and serving the very important role of an information intermediary, disseminating and interpreting events for the purposes of general consumption. Let me also in particular acknowledge the tremendous role that has been played by the parliamentary reporters over the course of the year. Many of you have endured long nights in this very building alongside us members of Parliament, and it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge how important your role is in ensuring that the events of the National Assembly are disseminated to the universal audience, not even just the domestic audience now, in an accurate and timely manner. Needless to say, the events of yesterday fall squarely into this category, the category of parliamentary events on which we'd like to ensure that the people of Guyana and the peoples of the world receive a comprehensive and accurate picture. It's extremely unfortunate that you, those of you who were here or were covering the events of last evening at the Parliament, and of course, or otherwise witnessing it, it's really unfortunate that you would have had to have been subjected to the unpleasantness of having to witness Parliament being defiled in the manner that it was. This is, of course, a matter that Minister Teixeira will return to subsequently. But I wanted, in starting my remarks, to acknowledge the tremendous work that you've been doing, and in particular as it relates to covering parliamentary developments. As Minister McCoy indicated, we will address primarily the issues that came up at Parliament yesterday and the events that transpired at Parliament. Foremost amongst the matters for consideration by the National Assembly yesterday was an extremely important piece of legislation, the Natural Resource Fund Bill, which will be the focus of my remarks this afternoon. As you know, the Natural Resource Fund Bill aimed to repeal and replace the old Natural Resource Fund Act of 2019. And by way of prefatory remarks, I would like perhaps to remind you, and through you remind your viewers and listeners, that the Natural Resource Fund Act was an act that came to Parliament in the twilight hours of 2018. The bill was submitted in November 2018, and as you know, it came to Parliament just around the time, indeed, if not the same day, just a few days after a no-confidence motion was tabled in the National Assembly by the then Leader of the Opposition. You would recall that the no-confidence motion was debated and approved by the National Assembly on the 21st of December 2018. You would also recall that the then APNU-AFC government, instead of respecting the constitutionally prescribed consequences that should flow from a no-confidence motion, that is to say the resignation of the cabinet, the dissolution of parliament, and the calling of an election within 90 days, instead of respecting those constitutionally stipulated actions, or following those constitutionally stipulated actions, the APNU-AFC then government proceeded to remain in office unlawfully, proceeded indeed to convene a sitting of the National Assembly on the 3rd of January, having mere days before that lost a no-confidence motion, convened a sitting on the 3rd of January 2019, and pushed through that sitting of Parliament their version of the Natural Resource Fund Bill. That bill, of course, would then become the Natural Resource Fund Act of 2019, which we are seeking to repeal and replace. Given that that sitting took place after the passage of the no-confidence motion, that bill suffered the fatal defect of what I would describe as constitutional illegitimacy, the fact that it was considered by a National Assembly that should have been dissolved by that time. And I say this because it is on public record that since at least late 2018, from the time the bill was published, the People's Progressive Party has been consistently on public record documenting our concerns regarding, first of all, the legitimacy of the Natural Resource Fund Bill, then Act, by virtue of the fact that it was brought to Parliament and pushed through Parliament at the time that it was, that is to say, approved by Parliament during a time when the Parliament should have been dissolved. But we've also been on public record in relation to our deep concerns regarding the contents of that act. Indeed, the then Leader of the Opposition, now Vice President Bharat Jagdeo, stated from the very earliest days that the bill surfaced that our party had significant concerns about a number of specific aspects of the APNU-AFC Natural Resource Fund architecture. We ventilated publicly what those concerns are, and we have maintained those concerns throughout the months that would remain while we were in opposition, all the way up to August 2020. And I don't believe there's any shortage of public reportage on our party's concerns regarding the contents of the bill and our party's intentions, specific intentions in relation to reforms to the bill, amendments to the bill. And I will recap those very shortly. And so we gave a commitment long before the August 2020 elections. We gave a public commitment that we will be amending the bill to address the most egregious and offensive provisions, the provisions that were the source of our gravest concern. We stated that publicly, and we committed it to the electorate. Amongst the broader range of commitments that we gave to the people of Guyana in the run-up to the August 2020 elections. As events would have it, of course, having considered the commitments that we gave, and having, of course, considered our track record both as a government, as an opposition, the people of Guyana elected us to office, and we were able to assume office despite the efforts by the APNU-AFC to hijack and steal the 2020 elections. We were able eventually to assume office to ensure that the democratic will of the people be respected, and we were able to assume office on the 2nd of August 2020. And we did so fully mindful of the commitments that we had given to the people of Guyana, and we did so with every intention of honoring and implementing all of those commitments, and we've set about doing so forthwith. In relation to the NRF Act, the concerns that we identified included primarily the following. First and foremost, the extremely ominous and sinister governance arrangements contained in the APNU-AFC Natural Resource Fund Act. And I say ominous and sinister because there are a number of features in the APNU-AFC Act that were of grave concern to us as they relate to the governance architecture. For example, and we are here again on public record saying this, we considered the roles, responsibilities, and powers of the Minister of Finance to be excessive. If you scrutinize the NRF Act, you will see that the Minister of Finance, under the APNU-AFC configuration, the Minister of Finance is responsible for all manner of things that typically a minister would not be responsible for. And the minister has what I described last night as almost omnipotent powers, is responsible for the overall management of the fund. The minister, this is the APNU-AFC configuration. Under the APNU-AFC configuration, the Minister of Finance is responsible for the overall management of the fund, is responsible for approving the investment mandate of the fund, which will govern investment policies, is responsible and has the power to approve the investment policies of the fund, is responsible and has the power for appointment of the macroeconomic committee, which will in turn be making recommendations to the minister, is responsible for appointment of the investment committee, has the power to set their remuneration, and has the power to terminate their appointments, is responsible and has the power to appoint the senior investment analyst, and indeed to terminate that appointment. And perhaps most ominously, has the power also to influence significantly and ultimately to determine the amount of resources that will be transferred from the Natural Resource Fund to the budget For example, the minister has the power to determine the economically sustainable amount. So notwithstanding that the APNU, and I should say this, and this will be, you'll observe this throughout the comments that I'm going to make, notwithstanding that the APNU AFC, I shouldn't say notwithstanding, the APNU AFC NRF Act is full of smoke screens that are designed to mislead. There are a series of devices and mechanisms throughout the APNU AFC Act that are designed to mislead, to create the impression that there is a governance architecture or that there is rigor, technical rigor in what the Act requires. So for example, they speak of a macroeconomic committee and about the macroeconomic committee examining the question of an economically sustainable amount. But the macroeconomic committee does not determine the economically sustainable amount. It is the minister who determines the economically sustainable amount. The bill outlines an elaborate formula for determination of the fiscally sustainable amount. And who do you think is responsible for calculating the fiscally sustainable amount? Once again, the Minister of Finance. And that fiscally sustainable amount is dependent on several assumptions, including assumptions regarding oil prices, assumptions regarding production. So you'll see they speak about a benchmark petroleum revenue. They speak about non-petroleum revenue. They speak about production-constrained benchmark petroleum revenue, all of which are based on assumptions. And so whilst the device of the macroeconomic committee and of the schedule those devices are used by the APNU AFC to create the impression that there is some basis for the determination of the amount to be transferred from the fund to the budget. The reality is that the Minister of Finance, the APNU AFC Minister of Finance, was given vast powers as they relate to determination of the amount to be transferred. So the first major concern that we expressed was the concern about the overreach of the powers of the minister. The second major concern that we expressed was the fact that there is no governing body. The Santiago Principles require a governing body to be in place, to be appointed by what the principles describe as the owner of the fund, the government. The APNU AFC Bill Act does not have there's no governing body, there's no governing board, there's no governing council, there's no board of directors. And all of the functions that would traditionally be performed by the board of directors, they're dispensed with the board of directors. When we set up small entities in Guyana, small regulatory entities, or when we set up small public corporations in Guyana and around the world, those entities are governed by a board of directors. We don't put the CEO in charge. Ultimately, we don't put the minister in charge. You just have to look at the legal architecture governing any entity that has been established in Guyana. Small public corporations, regulatory bodies. There's a board of directors, and there's a minister, there's a board of directors, and there's a CEO and an executive management. Bizarrely, the APNU AFC Natural Resource Fund Act makes absolutely no provision for a board of directors. Instead, all of the powers that would traditionally be assigned to the board of directors are concentrated in the all-powerful APNU AFC Minister of Finance. We expressed that concern. And let me hasten to add, and this brings me to our third major observation and concern. Let me hasten to add that the Public Accountability and Oversight Committee that is established by the APNU AFC Act cannot be a substitute and is not a substitute for a board of directors. A number of commentators out there are trying to create the impression that the Public Accountability and Oversight Committee is somehow an adequate governance architecture or an adequate governance mechanism. So there's no need for a board of directors, but the two cannot substitute for each other. And the APNU AFC was very clever when they wrote their bill, because when they described the powers of the Public Accountability and Oversight Committee, that Public Accountability and Oversight Committee has absolutely no authority to make any decisions regarding the fund. They're not responsible for overall management of the fund. They're not responsible for approving the investment mandate of the fund. They're not responsible for approving the investment policies of the fund. They're not responsible for recruiting the investment and any investment advisors or the investment advisory company. They have no such responsibilities. They have been relegated instead. This Public Accountability and Oversight Committee have been relegated by the APNU AFC Act to merely performing monitoring and evaluation functions. So their functions are confined to passive observation, monitoring, evaluating, assessing, and consulting, but no decision making. And you don't have to take my word for it. You simply have to go to Section 6 of the APNU AFC Act, and you will see what the functions of the Public Accountability and Oversight Committee are. So let us be clear that the establishment of this committee and the inclusion in that committee of some civil society representatives cannot substitute. That committee is not a board of directors. They very cleverly, if they wanted to, they could have made that committee the board of directors. They didn't. They dispensed with the board of directors, gave all of the real power to the Minister of Finance, and relegated the committee to mere passive observation. But furthermore, the committee was designed to be cumbersome, ineffective, and indeed was designed for deadlock, right down to the number of members. In almost all of the legislation, we would typically make sure that you don't have an even number, so you can, if you need to arrive at a majority position, you can arrive at a majority. If you count the number of members in the APNU PAOC, there are 22 members. If you count the number of members in the APNU AFC Investment Committee, there are 4 members and 2 non-voting members, even numbers. And given the APNU AFC's track record on questions of numerical majority, and the world at large would recall the grotesque spectacle of the APNU AFC trying to say to the world that 33 is not a majority in 65, given their track record as it relates to the determination, calculation and determination of numerical majorities, it could not have been an accident that the number of members in the PAOC was set at 22 and that the number of members in the investment committee was set at 4. Those could not have been accidental occurrences. So we had a concern about the fact that there was no board of directors, but also that the PAOC cannot be a substitute for the board of directors, and that the PAOC was designed to be cumbersome, ineffective, ineffectual, and, like I said, designed for deadlock. Fourthly, we expressed publicly a concern about the complicated formula that governed transfers from the fund to the budget, and I spoke a little bit about that earlier. We were concerned not only about ministerial involvement in the formula, but the very complicated nature of the formula. And I want to say this, that there's been a lot of public commentary about how much will be transferred from the fund to the budget under our formula, which is proposed in our bill. But I imagine you must have noticed that nowhere in that commentary, absolutely nowhere in that commentary, has anybody said, under the APNU AFC formula, this is how much would have been transferred. Nobody, not a single commentator on this bill. There's been a lot of commentary about how much will be transferred under our formula. Not a singular commentator, political or otherwise, has quoted a number that represents the number that would have been transferred under the APNU AFC formula. And the reason for that is that their formula was deliberately opaque. It was designed to conceal and therefore to facilitate ministerial manipulation. We said from the very inception, we will put in place a simple and easily understandable formula. We don't believe that the formula should be a secret that only geniuses cannot comprehend or only Nobel Prize winners in economics can understand. We would like to put in place, because we recognize that this fund belongs to the people of Guyana. And we want the people of Guyana, every single citizen of Guyana must be able to pick up our law and calculate how much is going to be transferred. This mustn't be a mystery that only the cloistered few. This mustn't be a mystery that only a tiny few persons know, are able to calculate. And so we gave a commitment that we're going to put in place a simple and easily understandable formula. Fifthly, the APNU-AFC Act is riddled with instances where expenses can be met out of the fund without parliamentary approval. Several instances. Instances where various fees can be met directly from the fund. In fact, it says here, you don't need to take my word for it. There's a section there, section 23 of their act, direct charges on the fund. The fees to be paid to the bank, the fees approved by the board for any custodian, private managers, etc., the fees for the audit, etc., shall be paid directly from the fund. The budget of the Public Accountability and Oversight Committee shall be a direct charge on the fund. This means that expenditure could have been met from the fund. Expenditure of an unknown quantity can be met from the fund without prior parliamentary approval. We took the position that every dollar that comes out of the fund must be subject to prior parliamentary scrutiny and parliamentary approval. And that was a concern that we expressed, and we have addressed that in our bill. Sixthly, I think, we made the point that the fiasco surrounding, here again, the grotesque and vulgar attempt by the APNU-AFC to siphon off $18 million of oil revenue, place it in a secret account, and meet expenditures unknown to the people of Guyana, that fiasco must never again be permissible. You would all recall that fiasco, and I won't repeat it. It's been played out in the public domain many, many times, so I won't repeat it. I'd be happy to repeat it if you would like me to refresh your memories. But we gave a commitment that we will ensure that such a fiasco could never arise again. And so we have now written into the law, we recognize the lacuna that the law didn't require that every receipt must be reported. We have written into the law that every single receipt into the fund must be reported, must be published in the Gazette, and reported to the National Assembly within 3 months. And we've written that into the law. And I could go on, but I will probably stop there. So what we have done is, we have introduced, first of all, we have dramatically reduced the powers of the minister. In fact, we have caused the minister to step back significantly from the management of the fund. We have added a board of directors, whereas there was previously not a board of directors. And let me say clearly that the establishment of a board of there's a lot of talk about the Santiago Principles. I would like to say unequivocally that the APNU-AFC Act was not in conformity with the Santiago Principles. To begin with, it did not have a governing body. It did not have a governing board. The Santiago Principles clearly speak of a governing body. It clearly speaks of a governing body to be appointed by the owner being the government. The appendices define who the owner is regarded. The owner is regarded as the general government, central and or general government. So we have stripped back, reduced the powers of the minister, like I said, forgive me for the repetition. We have introduced a board of directors, which I hasten to add is an additional layer So the minister has been pulled back and a new layer of oversight and governance has been introduced where previously there did not exist one. And that board of directors includes representation from the private sector and a nominee of the National Assembly. We have reformed the Public Accountability and Oversight Committee to ensure that, first of all, it has overarching authority to perform functions of non-governmental oversight, and we have made the number of membership a far more workable number. We have additionally simplified dramatically the formula to which I referred earlier. We have eliminated the opportunities for dipping into the fund directly by requiring all withdrawals from the fund to be subject to prior parliamentary approval. We require publication of every receipt into the fund and tabling in the National Assembly, thereby enhancing and improving transparency. And finally, we have ensured in our bill that all of the expenditure to be met from the fund will be subject to maximum parliamentary oversight. First of all, the Parliament has to approve expenditure to be met from the fund. Secondly, ex post, the Parliament scrutinizes the expenditure met from the fund through the Auditor General, the process of the Auditor General, and the Public Accounts Committee, and that mechanism is a well-established and well-functioning mechanism. It will be recalled that the Public Accounts Committee is chaired by a member of the opposition. And so I would like to say, ladies and gentlemen, that the Natural Resource Fund bill brought to the National Assembly by the People's Progressive Party represents a bill that is vastly superior to the Natural Resource Fund Act that the APNU AFC unlawfully enacted in 2019. In several areas, including the areas that I've outlined to you, which are areas that go to the core of good governance, accountability, and transparency. And so it is extremely unfortunate that instead of recognizing that, and I would say this, we could have discarded their entire act and rewritten it. We tried our best not to do so. In fact, we tried to preserve as much of their act as we possibly can. If you put the two side by side, you'll see that we tried our best, as much as some of it we may have thought was less than perfect. We tried our best to retain as much of it as we possibly can, but we had an obligation to the people of Guyana to address the most offensive and sinister provisions which were deliberately inserted by the APNU AFC to ensure that they had maximum and ultimate control over this fund. And so it's extremely unfortunate that they did not see the merit of these improvements. But I will end on this note. Let us be clear that their objection, they know that the amendments that we have made, we have reduced the powers of the minister at a time when we are in government. We've introduced an additional layer of governance and oversight at a time that we are in government. They know that our provisions strengthen the framework. But their objections to the passage of the NRF Act are grounded in one simple motivation. They do not want the fund to be deployed for the purposes of national development. They do not want the people of Guyana to receive the benefits of the revenues that we have earned, our country has earned from the petroleum sector while a People's Progressive Party government is in while the People's Progressive Party is in government. Plain and simple. So their objections to the NRF bill last night are identical to their objections to the Amila Falls project 6 or 7 years ago, are identical to the efforts that they made to cut our budgets every year between 2011 and 2015, to frustrate development, to deny the people of Guyana benefits. This has a simple objective. They want, for political reasons, to deny the people of Guyana the benefits that will flow from the operationalizing of the Natural Resource Fund. And so it's most unfortunate that it's yet another example of the APNU AFC willing to take all manner of actions to actually frustrate and undermine the national good and the advancement of positive national objectives. It's perhaps typical APNU AFC behavior, but most unfortunate. I will stop there, ladies and gentlemen of the media. I'd be happy at the appropriate time to take questions, but thank you very much. I know that I took a little bit longer. I apologize to my colleagues at the head table. I know that perhaps I took a little bit longer, but I wanted to address these issues comprehensively and exhaustively. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen of the media, good afternoon. Let me join with Minister Singh in commending you for the effort that you would have been making throughout this entire process, being in Parliament during the late hours of last night, reporting all the incidents that took place. But I want to say that yesterday was a historic day for Guyana and Guyanese, more for the positive than the negative. I must say that the APNU AFC actions in the National Assembly yesterday was embarrassing. It was embarrassing not only to themselves, but to Guyanese generally all around the world. And it is an act that should be condemned by every single one, regardless of our political persuasion or regardless of where we live or not. It must be condemned. I say that yesterday was historic in the sense that as a government, when we took office and when we campaigned, we said that we are going to bring transparency and accountability to the oil and gas sector, which is critical because we know that oil can be a curse or it can be a blessing. It all depends on the management of the sector. And that is why we promise, and we fulfilled that promise. We started to fulfill that promise last night to ensure that there is proper transparency and accountability in managing the oil and gas sector. And as Minister Singh explained, with the passage of the Natural Resource Fund, it will enable us to manage the revenue coming in from the oil sector in a more transparent and accountable manner, a manner in which we are accountable to the people of Guyana, and there is parliamentary oversight of all spendings and scrutiny also of all spendings. Also important was the passage of the local content bill. One of the few countries in the world, as a matter of fact, that has in place now a local content legislation, an act. And this is something that we are proud of because, again, when we campaign that we are going to ensure that we manage the oil and gas sector in a way that Guyanese benefit from the sector, that Guyanese benefit from the oil and gas sector directly. So, with the passage of the local content bill last evening, it is another step in ensuring that we as Guyanese, regardless of where we live, Guyanese in general, will benefit directly from the oil and gas sector. If I may go back a little background shortly on the oil and gas sector. We know that we discovered oil in 2015, a mere few days, as Minister Onij would have highlighted in the National Assembly yesterday. I think it's 4 days before the general election in 2015, we would have discovered oil as a country. The APNU AFC took over in May of 2015. Production started in December 2019, again under the APNU AFC government. It is very unfortunate that when we took office, there was no framework, there was no architecture in place, management architecture in place, to truly manage the oil and gas sector and to manage it in such a way that that benefits will come to Guyanese, manage it in a transparent and accountable manner so that all of Guyana will know how our oil proceeds are being spent and how much we are receiving. There was no framework in place. There was a document that was published, I believe, in January of 2020, which is called by the APNU AFC a policy document, but it was published in January of 2020. I'm saying that because that is important. That is 5 years after we would have discovered oil, and a month before the next general elections. 1 month almost before the next general election. And if one should peruse that document, you will see that it speaks vaguely as to how Guyanese will benefit from the sector. It was more about investors and how investors would develop the oil and gas sector, and not how Guyanese will benefit from the sector. So we decided that we need a strong local content bill in place to ensure that benefits trickle down to every single Guyanese, regardless if you're a farmer, regardless if you're a welder, if you're a mechanic, if you're in the catering business, if you're in the waste disposal business, everyone should benefit from the oil and gas sector, and also the opportunities that arises from the oil and gas sector, because we know that because of oil and gas now, there are many opportunities that are being presented in the other sectors too, like tourism, like agriculture, like in the manufacturing sector, like in the construction sector. There are many opportunities that are presenting itself now because of oil and gas. So we want Guyanese to benefit truly from that. And that is why upon taking office, President Ali himself appointed a high-level panel to start the consultation. So for someone to say that there wasn't enough consultation with regards to the local content bill, that will not be true, because we took almost 1.5 years to consult with various groups, with the operators, with private sector, with civil society, and with many other interest groups across the country. So the bill truly reflects the submission, the ideas, and the general opinion of the people of Guyana, the various sectors, what they would want to see in a local content bill, how they think that they can benefit from a local content bill. So we would have held several consultations. President Ali himself held a consultation right here at the Convention Center. Only a few days before we tabled this bill in Parliament, Vice President Dr. Barry Jagdi also held a consultation at the Pegasus with the private sector and different groups, and also the operators. In between of that, the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Ministry of Legal Affairs would have held several consultations with various groups, including accountants, the legal group, the construction group, the environmentalists, the transportation service, the shipping service. These are all agencies or groupings that were consulted with and were asked to make submissions to the ministry for consideration to be in this bill. So I wanted to put that out to show that there were significant consultation and contribution from the relevant stakeholders in the crafting of this bill, so that we could have a comprehensive bill. But I wish to say too that we recognize that the local content bill that was passed last night is a working document, is a living document. Changes will have to be made to the schedule from time to time as we build capacity. And that is something that we must recognize and we must accept as a people and as a country, that we lack certain capacity, especially with regards to the oil and gas sector. It is a new sector to Guyana. We are quite familiar with agriculture, with logging, with mining, with construction, with bauxite mining. But with regards to oil and gas, we need to be truly honest with ourselves. It is a new sector. It is a big sector and it is new. So all of us are learning at the same time. And that is why I believe and I say that it is a working document. So with the passage of the bill last night, that is not the end of it. That is not the end of it. We promise that we will have continuous consultation. The problem, one of the issues that we had in crafting this bill is that we have never really done an assessment of our capacity. We have never done an assessment of our capabilities among our human resources, our workers, our people, to know exactly what are the skill set that we have available, what are the capacity that we have in our local businesses. So to come up with the targets that were set in this schedule, we definitely had to held several consultations with the various groups. And most of the targets that you will see here in the schedule are targets that were discussed and agreed upon by the various grouping. For example, the local accounting services, we discuss, we consult with them, we reconsult with them, and that is why we made a change from 20% and we changed it to local accounting services 90%. We changed the local insurance services from 90% to 100% because we keep consulting with the various groups. And that is why I say it's a working document. We will continue to consult the different groups. And I wish to say also that there are 40 services or sectors, subsectors listed in this schedule here where we can offer, we have Guyanese businesses that can offer services, goods and services. Now, it is not limited to that 40 because I think that's a question a lot of people would have on their mind. It is not limited to this 40, but at this point in time, we, based on consultation, we realize that these are the 40 areas that we have capacity. We have the capacity to handle in the oil and gas sector. So it may very well be in another year or so we will add another 10 or another 20 or even 50 based on capacity. That is why the consultation will be important. The continuous consultation and a true assessment of our capabilities will have to be done over a period of time. Now, with the implementation of this act, it will help us significantly to truly assess our capacity, our capabilities. It will help us to truly assess what are the skill set needed by the oil and gas sector, what are the certification level needed by the oil and gas sector. So as a government, we can tailor our training packages to suit the skill set that is needed. So that is another advantage of this bill, in that it would help us to know or to be involved in the day-to-day operation of the oil and gas sector. Because as part of the requirement for the licensee, the contractors, subcontractors, IOCs in short, they will have to submit to us a master local content plan. That is a 5-year plan. So they will have to submit that to the election secretariat, the local content secretariat, which should be established at the Ministry of Natural Resources soon. That secretariat will be set up, so every single oil company, if I may say so, will submit or will have to submit a master plan, a 5-year plan. Added to that, they will submit an annual plan, which is a breakdown of the master plan on a yearly basis. And in each of those plans, we'll have 3 subcategories. The 3 subcategories speaks directly to 1, employment, 2, procurement of goods and services, and 3, capacity development. So from those sub-plans, we will have a good idea as to how the oil and gas sector is being operated on a day-to-day basis. What are the needs of ExxonMobil over the next 5 years? What skill set are they looking for over the next 5 years or for next year or the other year? And then we can train our people to fill those roles or fill those gaps. And on the other side of it, we can assist our private sector and our small businesses that are growing now to start producing goods and services that are needed by the oil and gas company. So that is why I say that the plans that will be submitted will help us to truly understand the sector and to help build capacity in our local businesses as well as our people, our human resources. Added to that, the bill, of course, will require every single Guyanese business to be registered with the local content secretariat at the ministry. So we will start maybe as soon as next week with the President's permission, ascension to the bill. We will start creating those registers as early as next week. 1, to deal with employment, and 2, to deal with goods and services. So we'll have 2 registers, 1 with names and the background of people who want to work in the oil and gas sector, and 2 with the local businesses, the companies that would like to do business with the oil and gas companies. So we will have those 2 registers. And those registers will be on our website. It will be published in at least one or two of the newspapers, so everybody can see who are the people and who are the companies that are willing to do business with us. Also the master plan and the annual plan, we will take out extract from that and we will publish it as well on our website. So every single Guyanese can actually go on a website and see what are the services required by an oil company, what are the skill set required by an oil company. So you can even decide what career path you need. As a young person, you can go and you can look up what are the positions available in an oil company over the next 5-10 years. And then you decide, you know what, I want to be a reservoir engineer. So I'm going to study in this field. And then the government also can see that and say, you know what, we are going to offer scholarship in this particular area or in that particular area. That is how it will help us to build capacity. And that's why I say it is a working document. It's a working document because we will keep changing the schedule. And in the bill itself, the act now, we have even made it easy to change the schedule. That as minister, I can just sign an order and we can change the schedule. So it can change easily at any point in time. But of course, as we build capacity, because we need to be true about what we can actually deliver, because every single business and every single Guyanese would like to have 100% here. And I would want to see that too, because from us on the government side, the reason why we presented this bill and we had it passed in the National Assembly is because we want Guyanese to benefit from the oil and gas sector. We didn't leave it at a policy level and the goodwill of companies. We have an act now compelling oil companies to do business with Guyanese company. So that is a guarantee from the government that we want Guyanese to benefit. We want Guyanese to benefit. And we want this to be 100% right through. And we want to add 40 more services to it. But then we must have the capacity to do it. We must have the capacity to do it. That is the key point. And I think we can do that over a period of time. Right? It's a start, but I believe over the next 2-3 years, we will build out the schedule to far more than what it is right now. And we will see far more benefits coming to Guyanese, especially with our second FPSO expected to start production in another 2 to 3 months from today. And then our third FPSO Prosperity being here in 2024. And now with us reviewing the field development plan for Yellowtail, Redtail for possible licensing. That is the fourth development. And then, of course, you know, we had many other discoveries and we'll have those FDP to review over a period of time. So in another 5-6 years, it will be Guyana will easily be producing close, if not more, than 1 million barrels of oil per day. Added to that, the utilization and the monetization of our gas reserves. So with that, you will see the amount of opportunities that will present itself. And we have started here because we want Guyanese to benefit. As I started out by saying, nothing was there before. This, you know, there's a common saying that while the grass is growing, the horse is starving. That is what happened during 2015 to 2020. Everywhere around the country you go, you hear people saying that, oh, foreigners are coming in the country and they're taking over our businesses. They are foreign trucking companies, they are foreign contractors. That is because there was no local content legislation in place before. So that is, we recognize that. And this is what we are doing to ensure that Guyanese benefit from this sector. So that is how we intend to address, or that is how we are addressing the issue, sorry. The bill also speaks to the definition of a local company. And that is important. Because in the past, I know a company can just come to Guyana and just register and say, oh, we are locally registered. If you're locally registered, it doesn't really qualify you to be a local company. In the act itself now, it states clearly that a local company must be owned by Guyanese, first and foremost. If we have 100% Guyanese ownership, well then, good, that is what we want. If there is a partnership or joint venture, or whatever the case is, at least 51% of the share or the voting right must be owned by Guyanese. And we even went further to that because we know that in some countries there is what we call fronting or economic rent, as some people say it. So we went further to that to say that 75% of the senior managerial staff must be Guyanese. And then the staff below that, 90% at least must be Guyanese. So there is a strong definition here. There is a strong definition here to define clearly what a local company is. That will prevent people fronting for foreign companies and trying to take away opportunities that should really go to Guyanese. What we would have included in here too, and which is important because a lot of people have been asking us over the last few months, locals who are working already in the oil and gas sector, they have been complaining of being discriminated against in terms of remuneration. That they have the same skill set, the same qualification as an expat worker, but they're paid less than the expat worker. Now, we have addressed that in here. We have here that Guyanese with the same skill set, with the same qualification, must have equal remuneration as any other employee. And I believe that is important because now our workers will enjoy the true benefits and the true remuneration that should have been given to them by the oil and gas companies. Now, there were a few amendments that were proposed by the APNU AFC. Now, the APNU AFC had the opportunity over the last, first of all, they had the opportunity from 2015 to 2020 to put a proper policy in place and, if possible, to table a bill. Nothing was tabled. We know that the table Petroleum Commission bill in 2017 is still left somewhere in a special select committee. Never met, nothing never happened. Worse yet, no draft, as the Attorney General mentioned, not a single draft of a local content bill was found in the Attorney General chambers. So there was no interest by the AP and UFC to get to this stage. They hurriedly presented a document in 2020 January, a month before election. That speaks nothing to local development and bringing benefits to Guyanese. So they brought a few amendments, and when we look at it, we peruse it, we discuss it, and we realized that a few of them, I think it was 14, and we thought about 10, 11 or so, were good. They were good enough. And once we have suggestion from any stakeholder, any grouping, anybody that will strengthen the local content bill, we took that suggestions. We took those suggestions. In fact, we arranged a meeting yesterday morning with the AP and UFC in this very room, and there were no show. They never showed up. So we went ahead and we tabled the amendments that we thought that will strengthen this bill. And one of those amendments, it speaks to the Local Content Advisory Committee. So we are going to set up what we call a Local Content Advisory Committee that will advise the Secretariat and that will make some recommendations, of course, to the Secretariat with regards to the implementation, the monitoring of the local content legislation. And I want to say too that the Local Content Secretariat will not be the local content police. There is this perception that we are setting up a unit to fine people and to impose penalty. Yes, there are penalties and yes, there are fines, because you must have penalty and fine. But the Local Content Secretariat will be there as a facilitator between the local businesses and the IOCs to ensure that we actually fulfill the requirements of the legislation, or in order to ensure that benefits are truly derived and we just don't have a bill where we're fining people every month. We want Guyanese to have business with the oil and gas company. We want Guyanese to be employed by the oil and gas company. So we took a few suggestions from them. One of the suggestions stated that in the Local Content Advisory Committee, besides from the government agencies, we should add a representative from the Bar Association. We said yes. From the National Tushao Council, we said yes. From the local petroleum organization, we said yes, no problem. From the parliamentary opposition, we said yes, because we don't have a problem. So now in here, in this act, you will see a representative from the parliamentary opposition sitting on the local content advisory committee, because we are inclusive and we welcome anybody and any grouping who have meaningful contribution in terms of the management of the oil and gas sector. So I just want to say that this bill, again, is a working document. And before I close, I will just like to highlight a few of the services and the percentage that we would have stated in the schedule. I'm sure that everybody probably have a copy by now, but I just wanted to highlight a few. For example, the rental of office space, we have 90%. And we are saying to the oil and gas company that by the ending of 2022, your rental of office space must be 90% Guyanese owned. By the ending of 2022, all the 90% of the office space rented by oil companies, be it ExxonMobil, CNOOC, Hess, or whatever the case is, it must be owned by Guyanese, or Guyanese must have at least 50% of the share. Accommodation, apartments, example, 90%. Waste management, 75%. Warehousing, 60%. Janitorial supply services, 90%. Food supply, 75%. Lay-down yard facility, 90%. The local insurance, as I mentioned, 100%. Local legal services, 90%. Security services, 95%. Trucking services, 100% Guyanese. And these are just a few. These are just a few. And as I mentioned, this will increase from time to time based on capacity. So I want to stop there because I think I probably exceeded my time too. So I want to stop there, and of course we will take a few questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for responding to our request to meet. I think whenever someone writes the history of our parliament, December 29, 2021 will go down as a most significant and historic day. Obviously, historic in terms of two bills being passed that would address what are the new sophisticated, technically complex sector that we have in Guyana of oil and gas, one in which we were in dire need of a legislative framework for governance and for how the funds would be managed. And both my colleagues on both sides of me have clearly defined and explained the bills and that were passed and how important they were in terms of allowing us as a country and as a people to benefit from the revenues that we would get from the oil and gas which belongs to us. And clearly, what we can look forward to now that we're putting a structure in place, which will take time, which will take capacity, which will take a number of things, but the ability of our country for the first time in its history as a nation to be able to access large amounts of money, to be able to build more schools and build water where there's no water, running water for our people, or treatment plants, or for more scholarships, for more hospitals, for more bridges and highways and electricity. This is an amazing opportunity for our country, and therefore, as my colleague Minister Ashney said, Singh, is that this explains why, regrettably, what happened also on December 29th. And where the other part of history comes in, you know, you had the good and you have the bad. And on one night, we had the combination of both. History that was positive and history that was absolutely one that we should be ashamed of. And we are ashamed of that the parliamentary opposition would defile the sanctity of the National Assembly as an institution and the highest lawmaking forum of Guyana, according to our constitution. And so this display that we witnessed must not be taken lightly by anybody. whether they like the PPC or not, whether they like the government or not, whether they like the bills or not. The issue is that the National Assembly, the legislature of the Guyana Parliament, was violated. It was defiled repeatedly, with the worst thing happening near the end, and that was the seizure, attempt to steal the mace of the Guyana Parliament. And so we have the midst of this, of something we should be celebrating as a country, having made this major quantum step forward, and at the same time when we are recovering from or responding to what has been one of the most tragic, I think, events in the Parliament. We've had, of course, major spars in the Parliament and differences. But this, what happened in December 29th was pre-planned, organized, orchestrated prior to the event of December 29th. People came in with whistles. People came in with placards. People came in and knew where to go to the control room to disrupt the internet, to disconnect the internet, the microphones as well, for example, as well as, so we were totally disabled in the National Assembly. There was no internet. The control room had been invaded and disconnected and disrupted. This is terrorist tactics. So you can talk about, you know, people walking around in the pit, the rotunda, I think that's what it's called, in the Parliament. And just by the way, no matter where the Parliament's held, that patch in the middle between the opposition and government is kind of sacred ground. It's really the white, what you call peace zone. It's a safe zone. You're not supposed to ever in Parliament enter into that once the sitting is on. And they entered into it. Not only did they enter into it, but they then became right up to the government MPs, in particular Dr. Ashley Singh, surrounded him in a very intimidating and physically violent manner. And so these things were not spontaneous. None of what happened yesterday was spontaneous, none of it. And so the events that unfolded when they were examined, and we're in a world today where everything is caught on camera. Thank God for the phones, because we're in the moment all the time and we can see what's going on. There was no provocation on the side of the PPP, none. We watched, we tried, we understood very clearly. We're in politics in the PPC, we're MPs, we know that what they wanted was a total breakdown of Parliament, and that is that. Provoke us, maybe someone will hit someone, knock someone, and then there'll be a tussle like you've seen in other parliaments. Just recently, I think it was in the Jordanian parliament, you had a fisticuff going on, and maybe that's what was one of the things they hoped for. But that we restrained ourselves, and by the way, this is the same PPPC that restrained itself for 5 months waiting for the recount and the declaration of the results for the March 2nd general regional elections. This level of restraint is one that shows the level of leadership we have in our party, and the fact that we were able not to be provoked into what we knew was one of their objectives. Of course, the main objective was to prevent the bill, the Natural Resource Fund bill, stop it completely. So it'd be dead in its track, and you would not be able to continue yesterday and complete it. That did not work. But I do want to say that the Speaker over and over called on people to restore order, to go back to their seats. Then he went to the second thing, which is to call names. When the Speaker names an MP, it is not something you take lightly. Once an MP is named and disobeys, then there are going to be consequences for that, somewhere along the line. the speaker over and over again. And so when you looked at the video, having been in the Parliament, and I'll say this personally, having been there and saw what I saw when the mace was being snatched and the attempt to steal it. But it's when you see it on video, then you realize this was just like a snatch, what do you call the burglars on the road? The guys that snatch your bag and run. This was that level of, to me, depravity. That when I saw MPs jump between desks to get up on top to grab the mace, this is not acceptable behavior. In fact, we mustn't take lightly what happened with the mace. We all, as MPs, we see the mace, we walked in formally every time we have a sitting, and it's put there, and then we have to stand up, and we close the sitting, and the guy lifts it up and walks out with it. And many people think it's ceremonial. It is part of ceremony, but the mace is the authority of the legislature. It is a symbol of the authority of the National Assembly. Any attempt to remove it is therefore an attempt to undermine, to overthrow the authority of the National Assembly, which is our legislature. And so this thing, that, well, they behave bad and, let's slap their fingers and we'll get on with the show, is not acceptable. What happened with the mace was one which is a treacherous act. Treacherous, I say, because it tried to undermine and disrupt one of the three branches of government. You have the executive, you have the judiciary, and you have the legislature. And anybody trying to seize and take over the authority of the Parliament is treacherous. And therefore there must be consequences for this, whether it's a civil court, whether it's a criminal court, whether it is a ruling of the Speaker. But we must never take this lightly. And I think I want to comment on the fact that in response, APNU AFC put out a statement saying that the bill wasn't lawfully passed and that the mace wasn't there and the MPs were not in their seats. Well, again, thank God for videos and video footage, because it showed, one, that there was a mace on the desk when I got up to put the question. Secondly, as I put the question, and the Speaker had to hear me, had to try and hear me, that at that time MPs were going back into their seats. Remember, too, that the opposition were not in their seats. There are 33 of us voting. So even if one or two of us hadn't reached their seats as yet, we had the majority, because none of the opposition members were in their seats. And so by that time, the Speaker put the question, called for all those in favor, and the PPP MPs were in place. The bill has lawfully been passed. It is binding and legal. The issue that we deal with, when I saw the Speaker being knocked over by the persons trying to grab the mace, are we as Guyanese willing to accept such type of behavior? Are we willing to accept that? This is not a question of whether you like the government or not. This is a question of Guyanese. Do we accept that a bunch of people can run up to the mace and try to steal it, yank it from the sergeant at arms, injure him, injure another man who is thrown on the ground and called a house slave, and whose spectacles and watch have been ruined, and lays on the ground hugging the mace, and this is acceptable behavior? This cannot be. There is something about us as Guyanese that there must be decency in us. Just like we stood up for the right to vote at free and fair elections and to have our votes counted, and we did that for 5 straight months. That is one of the values of our country, one of our rights of our people. This, what happened last night, must not go down lightly. Must not go down lightly. Because it's saying that it's okay to do this. It's okay. Anybody could do this. And it's fine. It's just the boys behaving bad. Well, it's not about the boys behaving bad and the girls, because the girls behaved as bad as the boys last night. In fact, worse sometimes. But that this is unacceptable, to undermine, to try to stop not just a bill anymore, but to stop the institution, the legislature, from meeting. And so I ask today, the people who signed the petition, there's 64, I think it was, what do they say today? What do they say today? I just saw a statement come out from Guyana Human Rights Association that basically pretends as if nothing happened last night. Nothing happened. We didn't pass we should have gone, they make a comment about us passing the bill. Nothing about what happened last night. We have a newspaper today that makes a comment. No, the opposition should not have done what they behaved with, but then guess what? They blamed the PPC and said we caused it because we went ahead with the bill. And this attitude of people, of plague on both houses, cannot be acceptable. Sometimes you do have to choose a side when it comes to good and evil. You can't just be sitting there in the middle all the time. And so this, what happened last night for me, and I've been in Parliament for a while, and I've also been as a young girl hanging around Parliament even when I wasn't an MP. And yeah, there were some things MPs did. We did. When price of flour went up, Mrs. Jagan put on a flour sack. And they brought little things of flour and they scattered it like powder on where they were sitting. You have their 1978 referendum where it was rigged, where Chetty Jagan tried to throw down the mace. Not steal it, not pick it up, throw it down in revolt. What happened last night, when you look at the series of events, from the time the bill, we are going to the bill, from the time Dr. Ashley Singh stands up, to the time when the mace, they attempt to steal the mace, and you have a man sitting outside having all his glasses and wristwatch being stamped on and called a house slave. That took a matter of almost less than 2 hours. And so I say, where are the civil society organizations who get so offended? Because what the newspaper did by saying that, well, we shouldn't have brought the bill, then this wouldn't have happened, was that it's almost like saying to a woman who's beaten all the time, well, you caused it. Your poor husband beats you all the time because, you don't know how to behave yourself. You don't cook properly. You're not there at home to greet him when he comes home. So what that newspaper, and I hope the representative of that newspaper is here, by saying plague on both houses and saying that, well, that's not the words they used. Basically, it's saying that we can't ever take a position that is critical of the APNU AFC. And so I am waiting, and I shall wait, to see which civil society bodies. Because I went back to the debate of January 3rd, 2019, the Hansard, and I suggest you do that too, as media people. How many speakers were there on the bill? One. Minister Jordan himself, Winston Jordan. Read the bill. Read his speech. It is empty. Who did he consult with? They say World Bank, IDB, Chatham House, etc. Not one Guyanese organization is listed as having been consulted for the National Resource Fund Bill in the 2019 debate in the Parliament. not one. So sometimes we can create fictions. I have no doubt that some of the organizations were consulted, but we also had the experience sitting in the opposition for 5 years, that there were many consultations that were held, for example, on the Civil Aviation Bill, where when it came to Parliament, it did not reflect any of the submissions by the civil aviation organizations of Guyana and the aviation industry. And there are repeated examples of that. So consultation may be a process. The issue of the impact on the bill itself and what becomes policy, what becomes law, is more important. And as Dr. Ashley Singh said, we have gone through what were the positions that were taken by various organizations over the years. Local content, as Minister Vikram Bharat said, was raised in the media from 2016 to recently. When are you going to have the local content? When are you going to have the local content? In fact, it's Mr. Harman and the PNC APNU government who hired a consultant who would work with Exxon to write a draft local content bill, not local content policy for the government. I think his salary was about 100,000 US. No, and this was never tendered for, it was never went through any process at all, procurement. You're taking someone with an oil focus, an oil bent, working with the oil company to draft our local content policy. What has been done with both cases here is that the laws have been drafted by our people, with our people in mind. And so the intention last night to stop the bill, so in my mind, is anti-national, is anti-patriotic, because what they tried to do was stop a bill that could bring benefits to our people. It could open up and provide more money in the economy, in the financial system of the government, to allow for improvement in the quality of life of our people in every corner of Guyana. We don't have enough money to do that ourselves right now, but this is our revenue that was sitting there and we haven't been able to touch it. And this could do well for our country. But the narrow political agenda of the APNU AFC is don't let them have the money, access the money, because who knows what will happen in 2025. They're paranoid. They're not going to win in 2025. And this kind of behavior of stealing a mace is not going to win them votes. So I just want to give those comments, but I do want to say, as I say as a last lick, is that the opposition at this point seems to have no boundaries. And that should be of concern to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashley Singh, Vikram Bharat, Gail Teixeira, for those presentations. We will now open up the floor to you, the members of the media, for your questions. The usual protocol shall apply, where you identify yourself and media house before you proceed to ask your questions. Yes, go ahead, please. Kindly use the microphones so we could hear you very clearly.
Good afternoon, everyone. Likram Bhagirat from the Starbuck News. For Minister Singh, with the criticisms this NRF bill received from civil society organizations as well as the opposition, can you explain why did the government go ahead with the passage of this bill yesterday, as opposed to sending it to a special select committee for, let's say, a specified period of time for additional public consultation, which would have included greater participation from these organizations. Also, in relation to the board of directors, what is the process for selecting the members to sit on the board? And who is the person selecting the members on the board? And in relation to the local content policy, I'm not sure if you would have seen the statement issued by the Bar Association, where they would have said that just give me a minute. Oh, where they would have said that they were not provided with a draft of the bill when they were invited to consult with the government, and that they do have the capacity to provide 100% local legal services. So there was no justification in the minister saying that they are rating them at 90%. How would you respond to this?
Very well. So let me take your two questions. The first question was in relation to referring the bill to a special select committee. Let me first of all say that the parliamentary procedure as it relates to submission of bills and consideration of bills, that parliamentary procedure is extremely clear regarding the number of days between submission, publication, submission, and consideration of bills. And we followed that procedure very closely, ensuring that the bill was tabled in good time. In fact, the bill was actually published in the official gazette on the 15th of December, on the 10th of December, I'm told. It was submitted on the 10th, right?
16th in the House.
Right. Right. So it was submitted on the 16th, 15th or 16th of December. And so it was therefore before the House for a good 2 weeks. As you know, it came up for debate on the 29th of December. So first of all, I want to be crystal clear that the standing orders of the Parliament, which prescribe the number of days between the first and second and third readings of a bill, that those standing orders were fully complied with. But secondly, let me say that this bill didn't represent a completely brand new piece of legislation comprising 40 or 50 completely new clauses. This in fact is a bill that actually replicated more than 20, in fact more if I'm not mistaken, almost a half of the bill, 21 or so clauses of the bill, represent an exact replication of what was in the act before. So there was already a piece of legislation that was in force with which everybody was familiar, and in particular with which the APNU AFC would be familiar, and with which presumably the civil society organizations that are now expressing their views would have been familiar. And so this didn't represent a completely brand new piece of legislation with completely novel provisions. It in fact represented for the greater part substantially similar or identical provisions to the original Natural Resources Fund Act. Even though we may have regarded some of those provisions as somewhat imperfect or not ideal, we said we would not discard what the APN, for precisely that reason. We didn't want to discard, we wanted to make sure that as far as we possibly could take on board, we could have discarded it and written a whole new bill. But we very carefully attempted to retain as much as we possibly could, not deliberately not wanting to discard what the APNU AFC had put in place, because we're not that kind of government. We don't just discard something because it was done by our predecessors in office. Where there are elements of the bill that we felt could be made operable and operational without causing great harm, we try to retain those provisions. I believe if you put the bill and the act side by side, you'll see that more than 20 clauses of our bill are an exact copy, an exact replication of the APNU-AFC Act, and that is not by accident. It is because we wanted to try as far as possible not to discard the product of their efforts. So that's the second point I want to make, that this is not a completely brand new legislation that is plucked out of thin air or that is being introduced to the National Assembly and introduced to the world for the first time. The third point I want to make is that the amendments that we are making were very targeted and focused. They address specific provisions, and they were not of great complexity. They were very simple. They are very easy to read, very easy to understand. These are not matters of grave complexity that require a lot of cogitation and reflection. The amendments that we're proposing were immediately available from the time the bill was published in the Gazette, and are easy to understand and process. And if the APNU-AFC wanted to propose specific amendments for consideration, they had the latitude so to do, and they didn't. In fact, as you know, they did propose some amendments for the local content bill, and in keeping with the People's Progressive Party's civic style of governance, we took on board 10 out of 14, if I'm not mistaken, 10 out of 14 of their recommended amendments to the local content bill. 10 out of 14 of their proposed amendments we took on board. They didn't propose a single amendment to the Natural Resource Fund bill, not a single amendment. And they didn't proffer a single valid reason why they wanted what their objections to this bill are, except simply to say that they wanted to refer it to the Special Select Committee. Let me say this, that it was clear to all and sundry that their intention was not to facilitate incorporation of anybody's views or any such thing, and I'm going to come back to why I say that. Their intention was to delay, frustrate, and derail the enactment of these two pieces of legislation. In fact, notwithstanding that they tabled amendments to the local content bill, if I'm not mistaken, they also asked for that to go to a special select committee.
Yes.
They also asked for the local content bill to go to a special select, although they proposed amendments, notwithstanding that they came and said, these are the things that we want to be fixed. We still want the people of Guyana to be denied the benefit. This is what the APNU-AFC is saying. We still want the people of, the APNU-AFC, want the people of Guyana to be delayed the benefits of these two pieces of legislation. That is why, even though they tabled amendments to the local content bill, they still insisted for it to go to a special select committee. Notwithstanding that they didn't table a single amendment in relation to the Natural Resources Fund bill. So they didn't have a single suggestion as to what they wanted to be changed, except that they wanted it to be delayed. So there's no doubt, I believe, in the minds of any right-minded, any right-thinking person, that their design and intent was simply to delay, postpone, delay, derail, and postpone, delay, and ultimately derail the enactment of these two bills, and therefore ultimately deny the Guyanese people the benefits that will flow from these two pieces of legislation. Let me also say that every day that these two pieces of legislation will actually generate benefits for the people of Guyana. The local content bill will generate business opportunities and employment opportunities for the people of Guyana. The Natural Resource Fund bill, once enacted, will put in place a framework for the mobilization of the petroleum revenues being earned by our country, the mobilization of those revenues for the purposes of advancing economic development. So let me make it crystal clear that every day of delay represents a day of delayed development for Guyana, and a day of delayed delivery of public goods and services to the people of Guyana. So let's be very clear about that. In relation to the process first, and I'm going to come back to your first question in a minute because I have a comment that I would like to make in relation to your first comment. In relation to the question of the process for selection of the board, the bill is very clear about the process for the selection of the board. It's the president who makes the appointment, and in making those appointments, the board will include a representative of the private sector and a nominee of the National Assembly. So to answer your question, that's the process. The president makes the, and who? It's the president who makes the appointment, and he makes those appointments pursuant to the section in the new bill. But I want to go further and say this, that let us examine the critics, the people who are criticizing the introduction of this board of directors, and the fact, let's put all of the facts on the table and examine them. The people who are criticizing the fact that the board of directors will be appointed by the president, they're saying the president will be appointing the board of directors. And so they seem to have a problem with that. But none of those people seem to have had a problem with the minister, who incidentally is also appointed by the president. None of them had a problem with the minister, who is one individual exercising all of that authority. The minister is appointed by the president too. Under the APNU AFC configuration, there's no board of directors. There's one individual, the minister, also appointed by the president, exercising omnipotent authority over the fund. The very people who are now criticizing and finding fault with the fact that the president will be appointing the board were strikingly and ominously silent when the APNU AFC introduced a bill and passed a bill that had the minister exercising all of that authority. And I invite you to do your research. I invite you to research the following question. The very persons who are now criticizing, very persons or entities who are now criticizing that the president will be appointing this board of directors, I am inviting you to scrutinize the pages of history. Go back to 2018, 2019, and in particular around December 2018 and January 2019, February 2019, when the APNU AFC bill was passed. And I invite you to produce and remind your leadership and the public at large, whether any one of these people who are now criticizing the president appointing the board, whether any of them expressed any reservation about the minister exercising all of this authority himself. And I will say to you that the mere fact that we're moving from the minister, who is clearly a political person, the mere fact that we're moving from a political person, a political appointee who is the minister, the mere fact that we're moving from that to a board of directors required to have certain professional qualifications listed in the law, the mere fact that you're moving from one individual to 5 individuals represents a vast improvement on the governance architecture. You're moving from one person, the minister, to 5 persons, and 5 persons for whom specified qualifications are stipulated. That represents a vast improvement. And in particular, I want to say to you, and I have a reason why I'm saying it to you, I would urge you, with the greatest of respect, I would urge you to examine the commentary that was offered around the time that the APNU AFC Act was passed and refresh our memories. I would like to have my memory refreshed too, because as you know, I was not here at the time, so I might have missed it. I would like to have my memory refreshed as to what comments were offered by these very individuals when the APNU AFC passed a law that concentrated all of this power in a single individual in their Minister of Finance. I would like you to refresh my memory as to what their comments are. I would similarly like you, again, forgive me for asking you to do research, but this research is useful for the purposes of public debate and public analysis of this question. The very individuals and bodies that are asking for this bill to be referred to a special select committee, I would invite you to examine what their position was in January 2019, when, after a no-confidence motion with no opposition in the Parliament, the APNU-AFC came to Parliament and in one day, with one speaker, pushed their bill through Parliament, and I'm told by Minister Teixeira pushed another 11 bills through Parliament.
Same day.
On the same day.
And finish in 4 hours.
The 3rd of January 2019, having lost a no-confidence motion, Minister Teixeira has filled in that gap in my recollection because, like I said, I wasn't here, as you know. Minister Teixeira has advised me that within the space of 4 hours, 12 bills were passed in the Parliament, including this Natural Resource Fund bill. No select committee, no debate, no opportunity for the opposition to offer comments. I'd be interested, once again, to fill in the gap in my own recollection. What was the position of these so-called civil society bodies and civic-minded persons who hold themselves out to be the moral conscience of the nation? What was their position when the APNU-AFC pushed through the NRF and another 11 bills through Parliament in 4 hours on the 3rd of January 2019 after they had lost a no-confidence motion? Thank you very much.
I just want to join in the response on the question that was asked, because it was premised around the criticisms of the civil society bodies. And I have a problem with framing the question from the point of view of a generalized context of civil society bodies, without identifying, one, who were the civil society bodies, two, what are the criticisms, and three, what is their credibility? Those are three really serious questions that we have to ask as Guyanese people and you in the media, because on the first question, just a few days ago, I recall reading an article published by the Guyana Standard on a statement made by the PSC, a statement made by the GCCI, and I will read part of what they said in their statement in relation to the NRF. It said, overall, the GCCI said it was pleased with the bill's general adherence with the international benchmark for sovereign wealth funds, commonly referred to as the Santiago Principles. In addition, it also said that it commended the government for its effort at attempting to improve public accountability and transparency with respect to the management and the operation of the fund. The Private Sector Commission also said that it noted the removal of the unbridled authority that was entrusted in the Minister of Finance in the 2019 Act. I say that from the point of view of saying that loosely couching the words civil society bodies without appreciating that there are many civil society bodies, and not examining who they are and what their credibility is. Because I recall very clearly, I might be young, but I've been around a long time. I remember very clearly when the Hope Canal was being built. When the Hope Canal was being built, a statement of objection and criticism was issued by the Guyana Human Rights Organization or Association, whatever they call themselves. This canal that was being built served to benefit thousands of people in Region 4, and it has proven to be successful in saving millions and possibly hundreds of millions of agricultural economic activity and the livelihood of Guyanese people on the coast, supplying goods and food for everyone, mainly in Region 4, allowing persons from other parts on the coast to supply the markets in our region. It's been proven to be so successful that now other canals are being contemplated for the flood-prone areas. So when we speak about the credibility of organizations, we know the history of particular organizations, so I am very mindful about using terms as civil society organizations, because there are many civil society organizations that say positive things, and there will be civil society organizations that say not positive things or negative things. In addition, our position in relation to the oil sector and the natural resource fund was very clear from 2018, just around 2018 onwards, as we moved into the campaign. We said that we were going to repeal the natural resource fund. We said that we were not going to renegotiate the contract. We said that we were going to have a strong local content position. We said that we were not going to touch a single penny of the oil resources until we pass a new Sovereign Wealth Fund Act. We have honored our word on every single issue. On the other hand, when the opposition comes to say that they are opposing first the local content, they say that they support local content even though for 5 years they never ever enacted a bill, even when it was pushed by many organizations for there to be a local content act. The government plainly said that it will not do a local content act. They came to this parliament last night and disingenuously said that they support local content in Guyana, even though they never did anything for 5 years. And then said, but they can't support this bill. That's what they said. Tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of Guyanese people will benefit directly as a result of the local content bill through training, employment, businesses, the transfer of technology, the transfer of skills, the introduction to new business opportunities. All of that will happen as a result of the local content bill. Disingenuously come to say to the parliament that they are in support of local content, but they can't support the bill. So the opposition's position, it must be understood that they will never support anything that will bring tremendous benefit to Guyanese people, because the benefit will go to the government of the day, and that is the People's Progressive Party. That is the fact that no one should bury their head in the sand about. The Amila Falls that Minister Ashney spoke about a moment ago is the classic example in a minority government situation where everything was provided. Everything was provided so that the opposition could support the Amila Falls project, which would have been completed and we would have added 165 megawatts into the grid already. They used it as a political tool and gambit to keep delaying and delaying so that we would not see the project happen. Use as another example, since it was asked about the delay and what is the consequence of sending to the Select Committee. The Petroleum Commission bill is another example that was sent to the Select Committee. For 5 years, or maybe 4 years, that bill has never seen the light of day. Now, I would like to also invite your attention to a particular issue that occurred yesterday, where the opposition, quote unquote, civil society bodies, if I can use your term for the sake of the point that I'm raising, many persons who have a very loud voice in the society on the issue relating to oil, called for tens of thousands of people to come and protest against the amendment being made to the Natural Resource Fund. They couldn't even get 30 persons. They couldn't get 30 persons to come out. And what I found to be totally disturbing that the leaders of the AP and UAFC would do to their supporters is that they would have them hold a banner that they printed to say that they should incorporate the Santiago Principles in the Natural Resource Fund Act and Section 4 of the Santiago of the Natural Resource Fund Act. Specifically says, the fund shall be managed according to the principles of good governance, including transparency and accountability, and international best practices, including the Santiago Principles. In addition, I want to say this in relation to the NRF, that our bill, and now that which is now passed, is far superior technically as well as from a transparency and an accountability standpoint. Number one, it adds an additional layer of that board of directors. And when the AP and UAFC says to people that we have removed our oversight committee, that is false. If you go on their page right now, they have said that there is a 5-man committee. Our committee, we have a board of directors, and then we have an oversight committee, which is a 9-man oversight committee, all from civil society that are being represented there. So you have an additional layer of protection. And when we have examined all of the criticisms that came from the international experts, that was incorporated into our bill. So for example, you would have seen the NRGI, the Natural Resource Governance Institute, would have made criticisms about the AP and UAFC's act. You would have also heard the person who would have spoken to the press about it and prepared a paper on it. His name is Andrew Boyer. In addition, you would have seen Eric Parado, who was the lead, who managed Chile's Sovereign Wealth Fund. He spoke publicly, making criticisms about the bill. Their criticisms were incorporated. One of the fundamental criticisms that was made about the AP and UAFC's NRF Act was the opaqueness of the fiscal rule. One of the important points of oversight is public oversight. So people must be able to understand what is the fiscal rule, what is your withdrawal fiscal rule, and why there's so many people that are aware and that can understand what our rule is versus a formula that requires a PhD in economics to figure it out. Even they themselves couldn't figure it out. The reason why all the people in the country can understand it is because we have taken those criticisms into account and incorporated it into our act as part of our reform. And now everybody understands it. So that is the one point I would say in relation to how it is far more superior. The second point from a technical standpoint, where our act is far more superior on the governance issue and how the fund will be used in a more sustainable way, is the fact that it's not based on future. Our fiscal rule is not based on future projections or projections of revenue. It's based on the previous year revenue. So most oil economies where they've fallen into very serious problems is when they are presenting their budget and their fiscal rule for withdrawal and budgetary support is based on what they project their production and their oil price to be. And many times, because of the volatility of prices in oil and also the volatility of production, because sometimes you can have high productions and sometimes you can have low production depending on, let's say you have some mechanical issue or some fault with the FPSO. If your targets and your projections are off, you now fall into a huge deficit in providing the revenue to support and implement your budget. That is what happens as a common problem in oil-producing countries. You don't have to look very far. The two countries that are near us, they have serious experiences of those problems that creates a problem for their government. Ours, on the other hand, is based on the previous year take. And that gives us the assurance of knowing what we have, what we can spend on, and then we have the assurance that comes in from using a scaled method of how we are having the withdrawals so that there is still intergenerational equity on savings.
Okay, if I may ask at this time, could I have an indication by the showing of hands how many more persons may want to ask? So 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so we'll go very briefly to Minister Barra and then Minister Unej, and then I'll come to the other questions, which we'll try to probably take all together before we wrap up. All right?
Thank you, Minister Kwame. Just before I answer the question on the local content regards to the Bar Association, I just want to say that the whole issue behind the APNU AFC and the few so-called civil society groups that are politically aligned, most of them probably don't even have membership. It's just a few persons running around as so-called civil society leaders. The whole issue with them is that they don't want the government to get access to the revenue, the oil revenue, because they know that we are going to use the revenue, and we will use the revenue to enhance the lives of every single Guyanese. We are going to use it to ensure that your children are better educated. We are going to use it to ensure that we have quality health care, international standard health care in Guyana. We are going to use it to ensure that we have better infrastructure so that we don't get stuck in traffic jam for 2-3 hours. We are going to use it to ensure that we boost our agriculture sector, our tourism sector, so more of our people are employed. And they know that they will be stuck in the wilderness in the opposition for a very long time. And that is the whole issue. That is the whole issue. Because if you look at transparency, the formula speaks clearly as to how much money or what percentage of it during what period of time will go into the consolidated fund or the budget. We all know the budget comes to the National Assembly, it is debated, and we spend an entire week examining the estimates, where the opposition can ask questions on any single project, on any single line item, as they wish, And we all know that the expenses will be scrutinized by the Auditor General, by the Public Accounts Committee. So there is full scrutiny, there is full transparency, there is full accountability. The whole noise is that the opposition know that we will use the money effectively to better the lives of Guyanese. And they will be stuck in the opposition for a very long time. That is the whole issue surrounding this whole noise about the Natural Resource Fund bill. And every Guyanese will eventually realize that. To answer the question on the local content directly, I started out by speaking on the amount of consultations that we've had, and that the consultations went through for over 1 year. Over 1 year, where many, if not all, the groupings around the country would have been consulted with or made submissions to the technical team at the Ministry of Legal and Ministry of Natural Resources, including the Bar Association. Including the Bar Association. Added to that, when we had our final consultation at Pegasus, I think it was on the 10th of December, if I'm correct. In the evening, we had a breakaway session where each sector or group was represented by at least one person, so that we can go through the schedule line by line. And there was a representative from the Bar Association there. And you might be surprised when I tell you here today that the representative that was at the consultation suggested that we do not include legal services in the schedule. That we do not include legal services in the schedule. I think it was Mr. Tini Husti, if I get his name correct. He was at the consultation, and the room was full. There were about 50, 60 persons there, so it can be easily verified that the gentleman said that the Bar Association is asking for legal services to be excluded from the schedule at this point in time. When we check back the submission that was made by the Bar Association early in the year, it did say 100%. His explanation for it was that their understanding was at that time that it was for a policy. But now, because it is a bill, he is suggesting for it not to be included in the schedule. Regardless of that, we consulted with other persons in the legal profession, and also from advice from the Attorney General and the team, the legal team. We decided that it will be unfair not to include legal services in the schedule. And that is why we went ahead and we include legal services and placed it at 90%. 90%. Local legal services in this schedule is at 90% currently. And as I mentioned earlier, this can be changed by way of an order, easily. Once we recognize that there is capacity, we can easily change this from 90% to 100%. But it will be unfair not to include local legal services in the schedule. I am not sure what was the objective, but sometimes people can have various objectives. Some can be selfish, some can be political in nature, because we know that there are a few legal forms in Guyana, or there are a few legal persons in Guyana who have already been contracted by oil companies. And maybe they just want to hold off the work for a few persons or one grouping, and not for it to spread among the entire legal profession. That is the only thing I can think of, but that was a suggestion. Nevertheless, we went ahead and we put 90% in it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Minister Warren. All right, so let's go to the other questions, and Minister Waldron will intervene at the appropriate time. Abina, I did see your hands. Yeah. Who was before? Oh, you have the mic. Okay, then go ahead.
Luan Williams, MTV News Update. This is for Minister Tisher or Minister Singh. So the opposition party has hinted that legal proceedings will be taken against the NRF bill. They sent out a statement earlier this morning. What can the government say about this?
I think we're taking it.
Right, so let's take the other.
I don't know
Let-
I think
what.
Kwame taking it.
Let me take, sorry.
I think it's a short question, short answer.
Oh, sorry.
All right, go
In
ahead.
that, okay, you want to wait then?
I was going to take all the questions. and
Okay.
then we can have. So you could make notes of it. So, Abina.
Abina Rockcliffe, Guyana Standard. My first question is for you, Dr. Singh. I have you here saying that the bill represents a bill that is vastly superior to the act brought by APNU in several areas, including accountability and transparency. Based on all that you have outlined, I think you made about 6 points. The inclusion of the board, Santiago principles, reducing the pervasiveness of the minister, etc. But something that was absent from the APNU bill and remains absent in this bill is penalties for abuse of the fund. Now, I understand that there is a board of directors, but the bill makes provisions for the minister. And before I go into that, I just want to say clearly that I am in no way questioning your integrity, but it is the minister, and ministers change all the time, can tap into the fund for purposes of a natural disaster and for the green state energy projects. Now, we have floods every year. Let's say, for instance, a year a minister decides to take $10 from the fund, and he takes 5 and say he had to buy a vehicle to transport vouchers for flood relief. What happens there? What constitutes abuse of the fund, and why aren't there any penalties in place?
Okay.
I think for Minister Barrett, let me get my notes there. Was there any study as to what percentage of local content existed before this bill in the various areas, so that we can get an understanding or a projection as to how great this is for Guyana? I noticed in some areas, like for instance, insurance, you said that it is 100%. Do we have any idea to say, well, the oil companies were utilizing 15%, and now they're mandated for the 100, so we can understand the boom or whatever else that is going to come from that? And okay, well, you spoke to the Bar Association and the food supply, 75%. You said there were consultations, and I'm sure there must be a reason that it is at 75% and not higher as other areas. Can you just give me quickly what are some of the reasons, just for the record, for something in the area of food supply?
All right.
Hi, good afternoon, Vishani Ragvir. Just 3 quick questions.
Which outlet you're representing?
From the newsroom.
Okay.
Just to follow up quickly on a question that was asked earlier, Dr. Singh, on the NRF bill, can you say if the government already has plans to use the oil revenues for projects in the upcoming 2022 national budget, and perhaps if that sort of guided the efforts to get the bill passed last night or to get it passed this year? Also on the NRF, it provides for participation of the opposition. I know it calls for a nominee from the opposition leader for the investment committee, and there are other provisions for participation from the opposition. Do you anticipate any sort of non-participation? And if there is that non-participation, how will that affect the sort of rolling out of the bill? And finally, Minister Tashiro, in terms of the incidents that happened last night, can you say how the government expects the mace grabber, so to speak, to be punished? How do you expect the mace grabber, so to speak, to be punished?
Yes, and who else has a question? That's it? All right, so we proceed to answer those questions.
Very well. So I will go first. I'll take the questions in reverse order. So Vishani, you asked about, you are absolutely correct that there is a very important role for an opposition representative. In fact, the leader of the opposition has a nominee on the investment committee, which is an extremely important committee in the architecture of the fund. And here again, that wasn't included by accident. The inclusion of that provision was a very deliberate decision on the part of our government. You asked the question, do we anticipate non-participation by the opposition in this arrangement? I should mention also that that's not the only place where the parliament, so you have the nominee of the leader of the opposition in the investment committee, but you also have a parliamentary representative in the Oversight Committee as well, in the board rather. So let me say that, sorry, let me just say that again, just to be clear. So you have, of course, the opposition leaders representative on the investment committee, and then you have on the board a nominee of the National Assembly. Let me say that, if we were dealing with a rational opposition, committed and interested in national development and in serving the people of Guyana, then I would have said to you that I do not anticipate non-participation. But as we have seen time and time again, even the greatest of optimists amongst us would have to concede that this opposition, this APNU-AFC opposition, could hardly be described as an opposition that's interested in national development, in serving the interests of the people, etc. And so it's extremely hard to say whether they will participate or not participate. But we will respect, of course, the provisions of the law, and where the law requires a nominee or a representative, we will do all that we possibly can to secure participation by that nominee or that representative. So one, you can be assured that this government will make every single effort to ensure that there is participation by all of the people for whom the law assigns a role for participation. But secondly, that we will also not allow capricious non-participation to frustrate implementation of the Act, because such capricious non-participation designed to frustrate and delay implementation of the Act will in fact be harmful and deleterious to the national development objective. So we're going to pursue full participation by all to whom a role has been assigned, but we will similarly seek as far as possible to avoid the risk that implementation of the bill can be frustrated in any manner. Which brings me to your first question, part of your question that I will be answering, and that is in relation to the connection between the operationalizing of the fund and the budget for 2022. There is an obvious relationship between the fund and successive budgets, and once we operationalize the fund, we will implement all of its provisions, including the provisions that relate to transfer of resources from the fund to the budget, which in turn will then be utilized for the purposes of advancing national development and improving people's lives. And Minister Barrett listed a number of areas in which that will be realized. He gave a number of examples: infrastructure, social services, etc. That, of course, brings me to Abina's question. And Abina, I'm very happy that you asked that question, because this is an issue that has been the subject of a lot of misunderstanding, perhaps, if I were to be charitable, or misrepresentation if I were to be less charitable. Or Minister Ramson says, if I were to be frank and assign the appropriate label. But whether it is misunderstanding or misrepresentation, this question that you have asked has been generating a lot of debate, and I'm very happy that you asked it. So here again, taking the second part of your question, you asked about utilization of the fund for natural disasters. Let me say this clearly. Any use of the fund, whether for natural disasters or for national development, defined extremely broadly, any single use of the fund, the drawdown of a single dollar from the fund, whether for broad national development, including, you made reference to the green projects, and I want to come back to that in a minute, or natural disasters, the emergency financing provisions, any drawdown, including the emergency financing provisions, has to be subject to prior parliamentary approval. So the provision that talks about emergency financing requires that an appropriation bill or a supplementary appropriation bill be brought to Parliament, be debated in Parliament, be accompanied by certain documentation, including the nature of the disaster, the economic impact of the disaster, etc. Those provisions are all listed in the bill, and it requires a debate in the Parliament and approval in the Parliament. So it's section 18 of the bill. It lists in great detail the process to be followed before funds can be accessed for emergency financing. Section 18 deals specifically with emergency financing. And like I said, it requires an appropriation bill to be brought to Parliament, debated and approved. So the Minister of Finance, the incumbent or any of his successors hereafter, as long as this bill, this act is in force, cannot unilaterally go into the fund and draw down a single dollar for the purposes of emergency financing. This minister and any other minister who will come after this minister operating under this act cannot go into the fund and draw down a single dollar for purposes of emergency financing or indeed for any other purposes unless they go to Parliament first, submit a request to the Parliament, and secure approval from the Parliament. So I want to make that crystal clear. There's no arbitrary drawdown for any purpose, emergency or otherwise. There has to be prior parliamentary scrutiny and approval. And then ex post, this expenditure forms part of public expenditure that will be audited by the Auditor General, and that will be the subject of a report to the that will be subject to the Auditor General's report in the National Assembly, and that will be scrutinized by the Public Accounts Committee. So I'm glad that you asked that, because it gave me an opportunity to clarify. And of course, Minister Teixeira reminds me that there's also an Economic Services Committee amongst the special sectoral committees that have been established in our 2001 amendments to the Constitution. Then you asked the question, penalties for abuse of the fund, and by that I assume you mean things like misuse of the funding, misappropriation, etc. Well, let me say this, that this law is very clear. To withdraw a single dollar from the fund, you have to come to Parliament and seek parliamentary approval. If you withdraw from the fund without seeking parliamentary approval, you're committing an offense under the law, which is punishable by law. But every dollar, so first of all, you have to come to Parliament. The law says so. You have to come to Parliament to get parliamentary approval before you withdraw funds. But your question is, what if those funds are misused or abused or misappropriated? Well, the law is very clear. When the Parliament approves an amount to be withdrawn from the fund, that amount has to be deposited in the consolidated fund. So you don't draw down from the Natural Resources Fund and then go and spend willy-nilly outside of the framework for spending public money. Withdrawals from the Natural Resource Fund go straight to the consolidated fund. They are included in the appropriation bill that is subject to parliamentary approval, the Appropriation Act, and they are used, those drawdowns form part of the consolidated fund and will be used to finance expenditure that is approved within the Appropriation Act. And so, if you imagine how this is going to happen sequentially, a request is made for an amount to be drawn down from the Natural Resource Fund in accordance with the law, typically accompanying the national budget. The Parliament debates it and approves it. The funds flow intact from the fund to the consolidated fund and can only be taken out of the consolidated fund in accordance with the Appropriation Act that is approved by Parliament. And any misuse of any monies drawn down from the consolidated fund is subject to the penalties that are covered under the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. These are public monies. They form part of the public finances. And all public finances are also subject to the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. And that Fiscal Management and Accountability Act has detailed provisions regarding misappropriation of public funds, and it assigns penalties to misappropriation of public funds. So it is absolutely inaccurate and false to say that there are no provisions to govern penalties for misappropriation. The fact of the matter is that you cannot withdraw from the fund unless you're withdrawing to the fund to move to the consolidated fund. And once it gets into the consolidated fund, it can only be spent in accordance with an Appropriation Act. And any misappropriation will be an offense under the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, because this is public money and will be punishable as an offense and will be subject to the penalties that are contained in the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. So the NRF Act is not an act that lies in isolation from the rest of the legal architecture that is in place. In fact, the NRF Act really represents an important but one part of the legal architecture governing the management of public money. The other extreme, or one other extremely important part of that legal architecture is the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, which governs all public money and which has offenses for misappropriation of public money. And those offenses have very severe penalties attached to them. No, not only that. I'm saying here that's correct.
So if you check
Section 35. Well, I'm saying that, but not only that. I'm saying that this act has a significant, the whole of Part 8 of this act. The whole of Part 8 of this act, this is not something that I am imagining. The bill is publicly available. The whole of Part, so I've heard a lot of people are saying there are no offenses and there are no penalties. The bill is publicly available. Part 8 of the bill deals with penalties under the Act. Part 8 of this Act deals comprehensively with offenses and penalties under this Act. But in addition, so I'm saying there are certain offenses and so first of all, let me repeat for emphasis. It is not accurate to say that there are no offenses and no penalties. This Act has a whole section that deals with offenses and penalties. But I'm saying to you further that in addition to the offenses and penalties that are contained in this Act, you have to also read the relevant penalties and offenses section in the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, because those also apply alongside these. Thank you very much.
Minister Barrett and then Minister Walron, and we will have...
I just want to give her the section. So if you just check Section 16 of the Act, and I'll just, Section 16.2, it says, all withdrawals from the fund shall be deposited in the consolidated fund. Section 16.2.
Thank you, Minister Kwame. Oh, sorry, Dr. Singh.
And I might add too that the Act has a very important provision that says that the provisions of the Penalties and Offences Act are without prejudice to criminal and civil liability under applicable law. And so the Criminal Law Offences Act that deals with criminal offenses like theft and misappropriation and so on, there are also offenses in there. So there's also criminal and civil liability based on the rest of the legal framework, and Section 40 says that. So the point that I'm making is that it is completely false and inaccurate to say that there are no penalties, because there are. Thank you.
To answer the first question, Abina, on whether a study was done, I want to say that in previously and even leading up to the bill, there have never been a detailed study on our capacity, our local capacity, both human resources and what we can offer in terms of goods and services. That is why we held so many consultations with the different players in all the sectors across the board. What we would have been receiving from the oil companies, though, is a quarterly local content report, and that would have helped us to do basically an assessment, but not an in-depth study. So we would have based our consultation and what we would have received there based on the assessment to fix the targets that we have set, the targets that we have set in the schedule. But what I highlighted too is that the bill will serve another purpose of enlightening us of the capacity that is needed and what we presently have, what skill set is needed and what we have or what we need to train, the amount of people that we need to train and in which area we need to train them to. So the bill will help us to have a better understanding basically of our capacity to and what areas we need to improve on. The other part of the question with the food, this is a question, is a fair question. A lot of people would have asked to why food supply is only 75%. Now, the idea behind the local content bill is not to create retailership, is not to create more importers or to carry up our import bill. Because let me use an example. For example, steel. We don't produce steel in Guyana, but we could have very well put steel 100%. Then it would mean that people in Guyana, Guyanese, would import it and then sell it back to the oil company. And of course, that carries up the cost. And we got to bear in mind too that we are paying part of this cost. Right? So it is a bill that is designed really to build capacity and not to build increase our import bill or to build retailership. It's really to build capacity. And I'm sure even you or any Guyanese, even myself, when we go to the supermarket, we don't take home a basket full with 100% Guyanese products. Right? So we need to understand that we don't produce everything. We don't produce everything at this point in time. A simple example, when you look at fruits, for example, grapes, apple, certain cuts of steak, certain tin products that are kept for a period of time on board that are not too perishable like others, they will need to purchase these items too, that we don't produce. So that is the whole reasoning behind it. That is why it's 75%, but it could very well increase in another year or two as we build capacity, especially when our gas to energy project is implemented in 2024. It means that we will have cheap, reliable, clean electricity. And that is when our manufacturing sector will start to build out. That is when we will start manufacturing far more products than we're doing right now. So that is why it is a bill for the future, definitely.
Okay, thank you. I just want to close off with two very brief comments. My colleagues, of course, did an excellent job with laying out the benefits to Guyanese of these two bills, and so I wouldn't belabor the point, except to add, as the minister in charge of the business environment, to say that the local content bill is really a game changer for small businesses here in Guyana. And we're not only talking about the medium-sized businesses, we're not talking about the substantial businesses, we're actually speaking also of the small and micro enterprises, the lady or the person who wants to venture out into catering services, providing food or transportation, a taxi, who has a taxi service. And these are the kinds of opportunities that very little capital, the little man, so to speak, can now get involved in economic activity, get involved in business and start to earn income, and even, of course, to start to employ other people. So this is particularly significant for us, and being part of the Small Business Bureau, to see the support that the small businesses registered in the Small Business Bureau and using those services to see the potential to expand. Another thing I would like to mention is something that is particularly disturbing to me and to our government, and it is the permission that the opposition has given itself to this bullyism and this behavior. But it seems, out of an incident that arose last night, that I want the public to highlight it, because the civil society that we're talking about, we have not seen and heard any outcry, an outrageous outcry about the attack on this young civil servant, young man, Afro-Guyanese, on the premises of the Parliament. He is an employee of the staff of Parliament, and when they tried to grab the maize, he took it upon himself to protect this sacred object that is sacred to the Parliament, and he held on to it. I understand that he felt that he could hold it against his body, and he was assaulted physically. His personal items were destroyed and stamped upon it. We have the videos to show, and he was called the most vilest and verbally assaulted in the most vilest manner, being called house slave, and you are basically, you're no good because you have decided that you're going to step up, protect this property of the Parliament, which he felt was his job to do, and he was assaulted. And it shows, I think it shows the entire public the attitude that the APNU, and the AFC, it gives an idea of the attitude that if you are Afro-Guyanese and you support the PPPC government, that you are not worthy. You are a sellout, and you deserve to be assaulted, you deserve to be abused, and you deserve to be called the most vilest of things. And this government has been the one that has been called racist. If that is not racist behavior, I don't know what is. So let's talk about, and I take the liberty to say this as an Afro-Guyanese, but I know that the government and my cabinet colleagues feel just as hurt about this approach, this thuggish approach. So when you see them marching into Parliament and feeling that they can assault the finance minister as he delivers his address, walk into the well, blowing whistles and assaulting the speaker, it is an attitude that we should not, and the public should not take lightly. It is not funny. It is not great behavior. This young man lying down on the ground, unable to defend himself, is being verbally assaulted and called the vilest names. And so what is this attitude says? This attitude says that as an Afro-Guyanese, you don't have the right, they have the right. You have to automatically support the APNU AFC as an Afro-Guyanese. That is what you should do. And when you don't, you are assaulted, insulted, berated, and called all kinds of house slave. Now you talk about slavery. The whole idea behind slavery and freedom is a right of self-determination of the slave. That right is a right to decide for yourself as an Afro-Guyanese what makes you happy, the right to choose where you want to live, how you want to live. That is what freedom is all about. And that right to self-determination, according to the APNU AFC, can only be exercised when it's showing support for them. And the reason we know this is that the day that I became appointed as a minister, I was berated about being a house slave and a sellout. They didn't wait to see how I performed, which is open season for me. If there was no criticism, there was no waiting to say, well, let's see how she performs. Let's see how she manages the ministry, how she conducts herself. We can have a discourse about her policies or what she presents to the public. what she presents to the National Assembly. Wait to hear what I have to deliver. From day one, I was berated about being a house slave and being unworthy because I have exercised my right of self-determination and decided that I want to support who I want to support and what I want to put my support behind. And my right to support who I want to support, I should not have to apologize for. No one earns the right to govern me unless I give them that right. And that is what I believe. I think it is becoming, we have seen that display with that young man, but it is displayed in every single one of our communities. In the circles, you hear them, it is being shouted from the corners of North America, from certain dark forces who keep saying that Afro-Guyanese who want to support, who want to decide who they want to support and what they want to support, if it's not the APNU, AFC, who seem to think that they have a monopoly over us. And it is very derogatory. And one of the other things too is that if they're saying that it's not political, then why say that you are a house slave? If you don't support, you're not a house slave when you show support, show support for their party, but you become a house slave and you become less than when you show support for them. So I find that the fact that they gave themselves that permission to abuse that young man is just symptomatic of the depravity that is occurring in this party, especially against Afro-Guyanese support. And we are finding more and more Afro-Guyanese supporting this party because of our policies. It's as simple as this. This bill, these two bills, are going to be a game changer. It is showing an approach of the government where we care for our people, all of Guyana. And we keep making that point that we are a government for all of Guyanese. And that is what our message continuously, and they are afraid of that. And suddenly, so what you find is that they are threatened, as my colleague, Minister Teixeira said, they are threatened politically. So they are no longer, they are not concerned about issues. They had opportunities to lay a local content bill for 5 years. They did nothing. Now want us to wait another 4 years and put it in select committee. But this is saying, so I just want to make the point that you can see that it is not about policy. This is them feeling, this is a political move, them feeling that they are desperate, and so they lash out. They feel desperate, it's all motivated where they are feeling vulnerable politically. And we saw that display with them, with that young man on the ground who has nothing to do with a party, but was just there doing his job, and he was insulted and bullied and denigrated, and almost, if there was no one there, he could have been terribly injured. And that is symptomatic of a people who feel that if they can't get what they want, they're going to try to bully us. And that is what we saw in Parliament. So nobody wants to any longer have any kind of discourse, any kind of proper debate. So what I consider to be disingenuous positions, that we are not giving them an opportunity to be heard when these two bills were out in the public domain for years. It is untrue, it is disingenuous, and we can see what their motive really is. Their motive is to bully their way, and they are desperate because they do not have answers to the Guyanese people, and they see the PPP coming up with answers every time, and that is what is making them politically vulnerable. But I do want to sound an alarm for this kind of behavior. We cannot condone it. I want to call on the civil society to see this behavior for what it is. As an Afro-Guyanese, I plead with all of us to not allow our discourse to continue to descend into this, where by the very fact that you're calling us a house slave. You as a black person, as an Afro-Guyanese, are saying that you don't deserve to determine for yourself what you think. That I could tell you, unless you do this, or you do that, or you support me, you don't deserve any of the respect. And we, all of us, have to stand up for our Afro-Guyanese people and speak out against this kind of behavior and this kind of thuggishness and this kind of bullying. And I really think that this behavior in itself is racist and discriminatory. Thank you.
Very passionately put, and of course, I myself being a victim of some of that PNC behavior, wouldn't like to lengthen the time we're here today, but to hand you over to the next speaker, who should be closing off the session here this afternoon, Ms. Gail Teixeira.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Kwame. We are pleased and thank you for staying with us, because we know it's been a bit long. And so we appreciate that, because we know as press people, you have deadlines, etc. But it's very important that we had this opportunity. Maybe last night, if you didn't have the shouting down, all the points that Ashley made here today, he would have made there on the floor, as well as Charles, who was supposed to speak, as myself, and others who were supposed to speak. So I thank you for giving us that opportunity to explain, because this is what we meant to do. Furthermore, one of the things I want to emphasize is that political parties and members of parliament were elected by the people. We have so many seats in parliament. Parliament isn't just about turning up and looking pretty. It's about doing hard work. And there's several layers of hard work. And your MP, you have responsibilities and duties, one of which is to prepare. To prepare for the bills, prepare for the motions, prepare questions. We were in opposition for 5 years. We kept the government, their feet on fire. Not by this behavior of going to steel maces and stuff, but by aggressive, active questions on corruption, questions, exposures on scandals, on the Demerara Harbor Bridge, on the Jubilee Park, on the scales, on and on and on. We did our homework. And we used Parliament effectively as an opposition should, within the standing orders, within the Constitution, within the laws, so that it's also responsible as an MP to go out and meet the people and to represent their interests. And so what we have in Parliament now are MPs who aren't even reading the bills. It was very clear in the debate on the local content bill that MPs were speaking who had not read the bill. It is also clear from the petition that went to Parliament that they had not read the bill either. And so the least one can expect is, if you're going to criticize, please do it from some basis of fact or evidence. What it seems to be the modus operandi in Guyana is that someone starts like a rumor. They have a way, I think it's called a sound bite. I may have the wrong thing, Kwame. The bill didn't have consultation and the dismantling of the 22 people. And that carries now, it begins to be like when you're children in the schoolyard and you sit in a ring and you start to whisper from one ear to another, and by the time you come around, it's completely different. And it's that kind of mentality, that kind of culture, where we are not dealing with hard facts and looking at what the bills actually said. I want to remind you, all young people here in the media, so some of the old heads are not here. In the 5 years of Granger, check. How many bills came to the House where the standing orders, all the standing orders were waived to allow the bill at the first reading to go through first, second, and third reading? Exactly. How many times that happened? 10 times? 20 times? Check your homework. I have the list. I know which ones they did it to. Where we had no warning. You have a bill on first reading, and you have to get up and speak. They did that on the petroleum issues, they did that on a range of issues, cybercrime, broadcasting, anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism. We could list them for you. Not a peep, not a peep from certain organizations who are now making a big deal about us not delaying the bill. In Parliament, the rules are clear. A bill comes, you have 6 days between first and second reading. That's the rule. Now, a government can defer. A government can, you don't have a sitting. It gives you more time. But as an opposition, your responsibility is to be ready. You can't have other people do homework for you. And so this whole experience that we're seeing since this Parliament was set up is that this is not a group of people in the opposition who are prepared to work. They're not prepared to read. They're not prepared to research. You're based on the spin doctoring of certain people in the opposition. Mr. Duncan, Mr. David Hines, Mr. Aubrey Norton, a whole set of spin doctors who spin, nobody looks and checks, no one does their homework, and they come to Parliament, and it then explodes, like how it did on yesterday. But let me answer the young lady. You may have thought I'd forgotten your question. I didn't, but it's a rather interesting question. It's a simple one. Opposition, Mr. Harmer says he will take legal action against the National Resource Bill. I want to remind you that we are based, our constitution bases on the 3 branches of government and the separation of powers. The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Those are the 3 branches of government. And there's separation of powers. They're not supposed to interfere with each other. Each are checks and balances on each other. That's the fundamental things of democracy. And so, a bill has been passed. Mr. Harman has some choices. He can go to the court. The judiciary will most likely say that is a Parliament matter. Go back to the Constitution. The Constitution deals with how Parliament regulates itself. The Parliament regulates itself, not the judiciary, not the executive. And that is why in 2012, when the opposition had 1 seat more than us, they went and changed the standing orders and they had the majority in the committees, and we in the government had the minority. We went to the judiciary, and the judiciary says, that's not our business. You guys got to fix it. And so it went on from 2012 to 2015. And then 2015 came, and Mr. Granger won, and the APNE won. And they went back to Parliament, changed the standing orders to put them back as the majority as the government, and put the opposition back as the minority. I don't recall too many people finding these things disturbing, but that's what happened. And so, to answer your question, he can go to the court if he wishes to. It would be highly unlikely, and I'm not a lawyer, for the court to get involved in ruling on something like this when the court has already, on a number of issues that were related to Parliament, said no, this is a matter that Parliament has to handle. The second issue is that does he have any recourse in Parliament itself? No, he has none. There's no other recourse except he can bring his own bill. If he wants to bring a bill that he feels can do better than what this is, he has a right as a member of Parliament. You can bring a private member's bill. If he thinks there are deficiencies in this bill, he can also, as a member of Parliament, wait a while and come back and propose some amendments to the act now. It would be an act then. He has a right to do that. It takes time. It may not have happened like he wants it on last night, which they had no amendments to put. None. Zero. The issue of going to select committee, let me just clarify one thing. Generally, when you go to select committee, it's because, one, there's been a number of specific areas that have been spoken about in the media, in writing, in letters, or by MPs. The opposition saying to the government, look, this clause here don't make sense, or this is a violation of the laws or constitution. We need to fix this. And so that's where the issue of government and opposition sometimes sitting down together outside of a select committee before and saying, look, here's some problem areas, let's try to sit and talk about it. There's no such discourse because APNU does not believe in discourse. They believe in breaking up things. When Mr. Patterson made his, submitted his amendments, which went out on Tuesday evening or afternoon, I called Mr. Harman as leader of the opposition, and I said, look, could we meet before the sitting to discuss the amendments that Mr. Patterson, that your side, Mr. Patterson, has put for the local content legislation. And in fact, I wish to signal to you, we have supported a significant % of this. So this is one where we want to just dot every I and cross every T and make sure, you know, that we're on one page. And he said, sure. And I said, good. And so I asked who the delegation would be, and he gave me Roysdale Ford, Annette Ferguson, Mr. Christopher Jones, and Mr. Patterson, David Patterson. 9:30 on the Wednesday morning. These persons here, my two colleagues here, and myself, and Mr. Nandalal waited from 9:30 until 10:05. Mr. Jones, I had to look for him, then we found him, then he said that, oh, it was only him and Mr. Patterson. He had to wait for Ms. Ferguson and Mr. Ford. At 10:08, he then said, I don't feel comfortable with meeting you guys unless Ford and Ferguson are here. So that called off that. I then had to wait another almost half an hour to sit down with him to work out the speakers list. So these things, of course, behind the scene are probably of no importance. But the fact that they tried to say in the House that now you want to meet us, it wasn't that. We were responding to amendments put by Mr. Patterson. We weren't saying now we want to have consultations half an hour before the Parliament starts. That's absurd. So Mr. Harman saying he wants to take legal action, let him try. The more productive thing was that over the Christmas holidays and before, he could have put amendments just like Mr. Patterson did. And then anyway, they weren't happy. They didn't vote in support of their own amendments when we put them. So, you know, we are government. We're elected by the people. We have the mandate of the people to do the people's business. And in Parliament, we are not going to be intimidated or bullied to prevent us from doing what is the people's business. An attempt to stop the Parliament by seizing the mace and causing total chaos and mayhem was an attempt to stop the Parliament functioning and the government functioning, because government must and has to deal with the legislature. It cannot function effectively without the legislature. You have a budget coming up soon. You have all these different laws that have to be passed. So this is a very bad precedent that has been set, and I said enough earlier that you said mace grabber. Somebody said mace grabber. There's not one mace grabber. There were several, and that they will have to be dealt with seriously, whether it is by charges that are outside of the Parliament or charges from within Parliament, but they have to be dealt with. This is a very dangerous precedent being set in this Parliament of Guyana, and we should recognize that. So whether you agree with the bill or not, this is not the issue. The issue is a precedent has been set by an opposition that has no boundaries, no limits, and is prepared to undermine the functioning of an institution of Guyana that is preserved and enshrined in our Constitution, the legislature. And so don't worry about all the thing about who caused it. The issue is that is the issue. And if we don't think it's serious, then we have a problem in this country. Anyway, thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening, and thank you for hearing us.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the media. I know we've tested your patience. I appreciate your generosity and your tolerance. I'd like to take this opportunity as well to wish you all a very pleasant rest of the day, and hope that you enjoy your old years, going into your New Year's wishes for a prosperous 2022. Thank you very much.